When I saw my missing son's face in that photograph on my daughter's kitchen counter, my first reaction wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It wasn't even the overwhelming rush of love a mother should feel after 35 years of absence. My first reaction was a cold, paralyzing terror that froze every muscle in my body, because after all these years, after all the searching, after burying the hope so deep I thought I'd never have to face it again, I knew that finding him meant I'd also have to face every single moment I'd spent without him. My name is Lorraine Mitchell, though everyone who's known me for more than a day calls me Lori. I'm 67 years old now, though some mornings when I look in the mirror, I swear I can still see that 32-year-old woman staring back at me, the one whose whole world shattered on a sticky August evening at the Cedar County Fair in 1989. That woman had smooth skin and bright eyes and hadn't yet learned that hope could be the cruelest thing you carry. The woman I am now has earned every line on her face, every gray hair, every quiet moment when the weight of the past 35 years settles on my shoulders like a familiar coat I can't quite shed. I'm sitting here in my small house on Maple Street in Cedar Falls, Iowa, the same house where I raised my children, the same house where I waited by the phone for years hoping for news that never came. The wallpaper in the kitchen is the same floral pattern Tom and I hung in 1985, faded now but still cheerful in the morning light. My hands shake a little as I hold my coffee mug, the blue ceramic one with the chip on the handle that I've refused to replace for the last 12 years. This story I'm about to tell you isn't easy. I've lived with it for so long that sometimes I forget other people don't know, don't understand what it means to have a piece of your heart just vanish into thin air on an ordinary summer evening. But before I can tell you about that photograph, about the moment 3 months ago that turned my entire world upside down all over again, I need to take you back. Way back. Because this story doesn't start with a missing child or a devastating discovery. It starts with an ordinary life in an ordinary town, with ordinary dreams, and the kind of happiness you don't appreciate until it's ripped away from you. Before we go any further, I want to ask something of you. If you're watching this, if you've clicked on this story, you're about to hear something that took me decades to be able to talk about. This channel shares real stories from real people like me, grandmothers who've lived through things we never imagined we'd survive. The fact that you can hear these stories, completely free, is a gift. But it's also a gift you can give back. Right now, before we dive deeper, I'd appreciate it if you'd take just 2 seconds to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Ring that bell too, so you don't miss when other women share their truths. I know it seems like a small thing, but those little clicks, those subscriptions, they help this channel reach more people who need to hear that they're not alone. And if you make it through this whole story with me, I'd love for you to comment below. Tell me what you think. Tell me what city or country you're watching from. Building this community of listeners, of people who care about real stories that matters more than you might realize. Thank you for being here. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. Cedar Falls, Iowa, in the early 1980s, was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and if they didn't know you personally, they at least knew your cousin or your neighbor's sister or the family that used to live in your house before you moved in. It's a town of about 35,000 people, nestled along the Cedar River, with tree-lined streets and brick buildings downtown that had been standing since before my grandmother was born. The University of Northern Iowa sits right in the middle of everything, bringing in students every fall and creating this interesting mix of small-town values and big-city ideas. I grew up there, born in 1957 to parents who worked hard and loved harder. My father, Robert Hutchinson, managed the hardware store on Main Street, Hutchinson's Hardware, which had been in the family since 1923. My mother, Dorothy, was a secretary at the county courthouse, one of those women who kept everything running smoothly while the men in suits took the credit. We lived in a modest 2-story house on the east side of town with a front porch where my mother grew geraniums every summer and a backyard with an old oak tree that my brother Danny and I climbed until we were too old to admit we still wanted to. Money was always tight but never talked about. We were working-class folks who took pride in paying our bills on time and never asking for handouts. My father's hands were permanently stained from years of handling tools and mixing paint, and my mother's fingers flew across typewriter keys so fast it sounded like rain on a tin roof. They taught me that honest work was its own reward, that family came first, and that you treated people the way you wanted to be treated. Lessons that sound simple until you're tested by life in ways you never imagined. I met Thomas Mitchell in the fall of 1976, when I was 19 and working part-time at the public library while taking classes at the university. Tom was 21, studying agricultural business and working weekends at his uncle's farm supply store out on Highway 218. He came into the library one Thursday afternoon looking for books on soil conservation, and I remember thinking he had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen, deep brown, with little laugh lines at the corners, even though he was so young. He had this way of tilting his head when he listened to you. Like every word you said mattered, like you were the only person in the world at that moment. We got married in June of 1978 in a small ceremony at First Presbyterian Church with about 75 guests. My mother made my dress, simple white cotton with lace at the collar, nothing fancy but perfect for who we were. Tom's family was farmers going back 4 generations. Good German stock who settled in Iowa in the 1870s and never saw a reason to leave. His father, Ernst, was a man of few words and strong opinions, and his mother, Helen, could cook a Sunday dinner that would make you weep with happiness. They welcomed me into the family like I'd always been there, and I loved them for it. Tom and I rented a small apartment above the bakery on 4th Street for the first 2 years of our marriage. The smell of fresh bread woke us up every morning, which sounds romantic until you realize it also means you're constantly hungry and gaining weight from buying cinnamon rolls 3 times a week. But we were happy. Tom got a job as a sales representative for a feed and seed company, traveling around to farms in a 3-county area. The hours were long and the pay wasn't great, but he loved the work, loved talking to farmers about their crops and their soil and their dreams of better yields next season. I kept working at the library even after we got married, shelving books and helping people find what they needed. I loved that job, the quiet of it, the orderly rows of knowledge, the way you could lose yourself in someone else's story whenever your own felt too small or too predictable. Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian, was a woman in her 60s who wore her hair in a tight bun and had reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She taught me that books could save you, that stories mattered, that sometimes the most important thing you could do was hand someone exactly the right book at exactly the right time. In 1980, we scraped together enough money for a down payment on a house, the same house I'm sitting in right now. It was a small 3-bedroom bungalow on Maple Street, built in 1952, with a detached garage and a backyard just big enough for a garden and a swing set someday. The kitchen had yellow countertops and oak cabinets that needed refinishing. The bathroom had pink tile that would have been fashionable in 1962. The living room had beautiful hardwood floors hidden under horrible shag carpeting in a color I can only describe as burnt orange nightmare. We spent 6 months fixing up that house, doing all the work ourselves to save money. Tom tore out the carpeting and refinished those hardwood floors until they gleamed. I painted every room, standing on ladders with a bandana tied around my hair, getting paint in places paint should never be. We replaced light fixtures from garage sales and refinished furniture we found on curbs on trash day. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and every nail Tom hammered, every wall I painted, felt like we were building not just a house, but a future. Our daughter Sarah was born in November 1984. I was 27 years old and terrified I wouldn't know how to be a mother. But the second the nurse placed that tiny, squalling bundle in my arms, something clicked into place inside me. This was what I was meant to do. This was who I was meant to be. Tom cried when he held her for the first time, actual tears running down his face. And he wasn't a man who cried easily. We brought her home to the nursery we'd prepared, with yellow walls because we hadn't known if we were having a boy or a girl, and a mobile of little farm animals that Tom's mother had made by hand. Being a mother consumed me in the best possible way. I quit my job at the library to stay home with Sarah, and Tom took on extra routes to make up for the lost income. My days became a rhythm of feedings and diapers and laundry, and those precious moments when she'd fall asleep on my chest, and I could just breathe in that perfect baby smell. Tom would come home every evening, no matter how late, and spend an hour just holding her, talking to her about his day, even though she couldn't possibly understand a word. He was besotted with that little girl, absolutely besotted. Sarah was 2.5 when I found out I was pregnant again. It wasn't planned. We'd wanted to wait a few more years, get more stable financially, but life had its own ideas. Michael Joseph Mitchell came into the world on March 15, 1987, at Cedar Falls Community Hospital, weighing 7 pounds, 9 ounces. He had a shock of dark hair and the loudest cry I'd ever heard. Where Sarah had been a relatively easy baby, Michael was my challenge. He never seemed to sleep, always wanting to be held, always hungry, always fussy unless he was in someone's arms. But oh, how I loved that boy. He had Tom's eyes, those same deep brown pools that seemed to see right through you. As he grew from an infant to a toddler, his personality emerged. Curious, fearless, always getting into things he shouldn't. By the time he was 2, he'd figured out how to climb out of his crib, how to open the child-proof locks on the kitchen cabinets, how to charm his way out of trouble with a gap-toothed smile that made it impossible to stay mad at him. Money was tight with 2 kids and only 1 income, but we managed. Tom got promoted to regional sales manager in 1988, which meant better pay, but also more travel. Sometimes he'd be gone for 3 or 4 days at a stretch, visiting farms in southern Minnesota or eastern Nebraska. I managed the house and the kids on my own during those times, exhausted but content. My mother would come over once or twice a week to help with the children, and Tom's mother, Helen, would drop off casseroles and freshly baked bread. The neighborhood on Maple Street was perfect for raising kids. The Johnsons lived 2 doors down with 3 boys roughly the same ages as Sarah and Michael. The Petersons across the street had twin girls a year older than Sarah. Summer evenings, all the kids would play in the street, kickball, hide and seek, riding bikes up and down the sidewalk, while the parents sat on porches drinking iced tea and keeping watch. It felt safe. It felt like the kind of childhood I'd had, the kind I wanted for my children. Sarah started kindergarten in the fall of 1989. She was bright and social, making friends easily, bringing home artwork and stories about her day. Michael, at 2.5, missed her during the day, but loved having her home in the afternoons. They'd play together in the backyard, Sarah, the bossy big sister, and Michael, the adoring little brother who wanted to do everything she did. Tom and I were happy, not the passionate, desperate happiness of newlyweds, but something deeper. The contentment of building a life together, of watching our children grow, of knowing that even when money was tight and the roof leaked and the car needed repairs we couldn't quite afford, we had each other. We had this family we'd created. We had these 2 perfect kids who were healthy and loved and safe. That's what I believed anyway, that my children were safe, that nothing bad could happen in Cedar Falls, Iowa, in a neighborhood where everyone looked out for each other. That the worst thing I'd have to worry about was scraped knees and flu season and whether we could afford to take the kids to the county fair in August. The Cedar County Fair had been a tradition in our town for over 100 years, held every August at the fairgrounds on the west side of town. It was one of those things you looked forward to all year. The Ferris wheel lit up against the night sky, the smell of corn dogs and cotton candy, the livestock barns where kids from 4-H showed off their prize pigs and cattle, the rickety carnival games where you could win oversized stuffed animals that barely fit in your car. Tom and I had gone to the fair every year since we'd been together, first as teenagers holding hands and trying to win goldfish in ping-pong ball games, then as a married couple sharing funnel cakes and listening to the local bands play on the makeshift stage, and finally as parents, taking Sarah when she was old enough to enjoy the children's rides and the petting zoo. August 1989 was supposed to be Michael's first year really experiencing the fair. At 7 years old, he was finally tall enough for most of the kiddie rides, and he'd been talking about going for weeks, ever since he'd seen the posters go up around town. Sarah, now almost 5, had been to the fair 3 times before and considered herself an expert, telling Michael all about the Tilt-A-Whirl and the House of Mirrors and the best places to get cotton candy. I remember feeling excited as August approached. Tom had been working so hard, gone so much, and the fair felt like a chance for us to just be a family. To have fun together without worrying about bills or work or all the little stresses that accumulated like dust in the corners of our lives. But there were little things, little moments, in the months leading up to that August that I didn't pay enough attention to at the time. Small details that seemed insignificant, but that I've replayed in my mind 10,000 times since. Wondering if I'd been more alert, more aware, if I could have prevented what was coming. The first sign came in May of that year, about 3 months before the fair. I was at the grocery store, Hy-Vee on College Street, doing the weekly shopping with both kids in tow. Sarah was walking beside the cart being mostly helpful, and Michael was sitting in the cart's child seat, his legs dangling, wearing his favorite striped shirt, red, white, and blue stripes that were starting to fray at the collar because he wore it so much I could barely get it into the laundry. We were in the cereal aisle, and I was trying to decide between 2 brands when Michael suddenly said, "Mama, that man is looking at me." I glanced up from the cereal boxes and saw a man standing at the end of the aisle, near the corner where the cereal aisle met the dairy section. He was maybe in his late 40s, wearing jeans and a blue button-down shirt, nothing particularly remarkable about him. He had brown hair going gray at the temples and was holding a basket with just a few items in it. When I looked at him, he immediately looked away, turned, and walked quickly toward the front of the store. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Michael was a cute kid. People looked at cute kids all the time. I remember ruffling his hair and saying, "Some people just like to smile at children, honey. It's okay." Michael nodded, but seemed uneasy, twisting his hands together in that way he did when something bothered him. I should have paid more attention to that feeling. I should have asked Michael what exactly made him uncomfortable about the man's look. But I was tired, juggling a grocery list and 2 kids and trying to remember if we needed milk or if I'd bought some earlier in the week. So I just picked the cheaper cereal, tossed it in the cart, and moved on to the next aisle. The second incident happened in June. We'd taken the kids to the city pool on a Saturday afternoon. It was one of those perfect summer days, temperature in the low 80s, bright blue sky with just a few white clouds drifting by. The city pool was crowded with families, kids shrieking and splashing, the smell of chlorine and sunscreen, lifeguards blowing whistles, parents trying to find spots on the concrete deck to spread out their towels. Tom was in the water with Sarah, teaching her to dive. She was fearless, that girl, jumping off the edge over and over while Tom waited below to catch her. Michael was playing in the shallow end with some other toddlers, splashing around under the watchful eye of a teenage lifeguard. I was sitting on a deck chair, wearing my one-piece bathing suit and a cover-up, trying to read a paperback novel but mostly just watching the kids. At one point, I looked over and noticed a woman standing near the fence at the far end of the pool area. She was watching Michael specifically. I was certain of it. She was maybe in her 50s, wearing a floral sundress and sunglasses, and there was something about her posture, the way she stood so still, that caught my attention. When Michael climbed out of the pool to run over to me for a drink from his sippy cup, the woman moved slightly, repositioning herself to maintain a clear view. My heart started beating faster. I stood up, holding Michael close, and stared directly at the woman. For a moment, our eyes met even through her sunglasses. Then she turned and walked out through the pool gate, disappearing into the parking lot. I told myself I was being paranoid. Pools were public places. People watched other people. Maybe she was a grandmother missing her own grandkids, enjoying the sight of happy children playing. Maybe I'd imagined that she was watching Michael specifically. Tom came over dripping wet, asking if everything was okay, and I found myself hesitating before telling him what I'd seen. When I did explain it, he looked concerned, but tried to reassure me. "Lori, honey, you can't let yourself get worked up over every stranger who looks at the kids," he said gently, wrapping a towel around his shoulders. "I know there's scary stuff on the news sometimes, but Cedar Falls is safe. We're safe here." He was right, I told myself. I was being overprotective, paranoid, letting news stories about stranger danger infiltrate my common sense. This was Cedar Falls, Iowa. Nothing bad happened here. I pushed the worry down deep and tried to enjoy the rest of the afternoon, but I made sure to keep Michael within arm's reach for the remainder of our time at the pool. The third incident was in early July. I'd taken both kids to the library, my old workplace, where I still went regularly to borrow books. Mrs. Henderson was still the head librarian, now in her late 60s, and she always made a big fuss over Sarah and Michael when I brought them in. The library had a children's section with small chairs and colorful murals on the walls, and I'd let the kids pick out books while I browsed the adult fiction section nearby. I was looking through the new releases when I heard Sarah's voice, sharp and protective. "No, thank you. We're not supposed to talk to strangers." I rushed around the bookshelf to find a man crouched down at the kids' level, holding out a piece of candy. Sarah had positioned herself in front of Michael, her little hands on her hips, her face set in that determined expression she got when she knew she was following the rules. Michael was peeking around from behind his sister, looking uncertain. The man stood up quickly when he saw me approaching. He was younger than the man from the grocery store, maybe in his 30s, with sandy blonde hair and a nervous smile. "I'm sorry," he said, holding up his hands. "I just thought, they're such well-behaved kids. I was just trying to be nice." Mrs. Henderson appeared from nowhere, her sharp eyes taking in the situation immediately. "Is there a problem here, Laurie?" The man backed away. "No problem. I was just leaving anyway." He practically ran out of the library, leaving his candy, Tootsie Rolls, on the table in the children's section. Mrs. Henderson scooped up the candy and threw it in the trash. "I've never seen that man before," she said quietly, so the kids wouldn't hear. "And I know everyone who comes in here regularly." She put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing teaching these children not to take candy from strangers." I hugged Sarah tight, praising her for remembering the safety rules we'd taught her. But inside, my stomach was churning. 3 incidents, 3 strangers taking an interest in my children, specifically Michael, in the span of 2 months. Was I connecting dots that weren't there? Was I being paranoid? I told Tom about it that night, after the kids were in bed. We sat at the kitchen table with cups of coffee growing cold, and I watched his face grow serious as I recounted all 3 incidents. "Maybe we should call the police," I suggested, even though I felt foolish saying it. "What would I even tell them? That people have looked at our son?" Tom rubbed his face with both hands, clearly troubled. "I don't know, Laurie. I mean, you're probably right that it's nothing. But if it makes you feel better, we can call the non-emergency line tomorrow. Just let them know we've noticed some odd behavior." We never made that call. The next day, Tom had to leave for a 4-day trip through Minnesota, and by the time he got back, I'd talked myself out of it again. Nothing had actually happened. Michael was fine. Sarah was fine. I was just being an overprotective mother, seeing threats that weren't there. The 4th incident happened at the 4th of July parade downtown. Main Street was packed with people lining the sidewalks, kids sitting on the curb with bags ready to collect the candy thrown from the floats. The high school band marched by playing patriotic songs slightly off-key. The local car dealership had a convertible with the mayor waving from the back seat. The VFW had a truck pulling a float, honoring local veterans. We'd found a good spot in front of the hardware store. My father had saved it for us, standing there for an hour before we arrived with the kids. Sarah and Michael were sitting on the curb, and Tom and I stood right behind them. My father was next to us. and my mother was talking to a friend from church a few feet away. During a lull between floats, I noticed Michael standing up and turning around, looking at something behind us. I followed his gaze and saw a car parked on a side street, maybe 30 yards away. There was a person in the driver's seat. I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman, and they seemed to be taking photographs. Not of the parade, but of the crowd. Of us, specifically. "Tom," I said, grabbing his arm and pointing. By the time Tom looked, the car was already pulling away, turning down the alley behind the hardware store. I only caught a glimpse of it. A dark sedan, maybe blue or black, too far away to see the license plate. "Did you see that?" I asked Tom urgently. "That car. Someone was taking pictures of us." Tom frowned, shielding his eyes from the sun to look where I was pointing, but the car was already gone. "Are you sure, honey? There's a lot of people taking pictures at a parade." "They weren't taking pictures of the parade," I insisted. "They were pointed at us, at the kids." My father overheard and immediately went on alert, his old protective instincts kicking in. He was a veteran, served in Korea, and he'd always been vigilant about safety. "What kind of car?" he asked. "Dark-colored sedan. That's all I saw before it left." My father walked down the alley to see if he could spot the vehicle, but it was long gone. When he came back, he pulled Tom aside, and I could see them having a serious conversation, my father's face grave. When Tom came back to me, he said quietly, "Your dad thinks we should file a police report, just to have it on record." This time, we did. That evening, after the parade was over and the kids were exhausted and sugar high from candy, Tom went to the Cedar Falls Police Department and filed a report. He explained the series of incidents: the man at the grocery store, the woman at the pool, the man at the library, the car at the parade. The officer who took the report was professional and concerned, but there wasn't much they could do. No crimes had been committed. No one had approached the children except to offer candy. The car at the parade could have been anyone, doing anything. "We'll keep an eye out," the officer said, "and we'll increase patrols in your neighborhood. But, sir, I have to be honest with you. Without a specific threat or an actual crime, there's not much we can pursue. My best advice is to stay vigilant, keep teaching your kids about stranger danger, and don't let them out of your sight in public places." We followed that advice religiously for the next month. I didn't let the kids play in the front yard without me watching from the porch. I walked Sarah to and from the neighbor's house, even though it was just 2 doors down. Michael wasn't allowed in the backyard unless I was out there with him. Tom cut back on his travel, taking only essential trips. The 5th incident was the one that, in retrospect, I should have recognized as a direct warning. It was late July, about 2 weeks before the county fair. I was in the backyard, hanging laundry on the clothesline. I preferred the smell of line-dried sheets to the dryer, and it saved on the electric bill. Michael was playing in his sandbox about 20 feet away, making a castle with his toy trucks. Sarah was inside watching afternoon cartoons. I just finished pinning up a fitted sheet when I heard Michael say, "Hi." I turned to see him standing at the back fence, talking to someone on the other side. Our backyard had a chain-link fence about 4 feet tall, and beyond it was an alley that ran between our block and the next. I couldn't see who Michael was talking to because the angle was wrong, but I could hear a man's voice responding. I dropped the pillowcase I'd been holding and ran toward Michael, my heart in my throat. "Michael, get away from the fence!" Michael looked startled by my sharp tone, but obediently stepped back. By the time I reached the fence and looked into the alley, there was no one there, just empty pavement and the back fences of the houses on the next street over. "Who were you talking to?" I asked Michael, trying to keep my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. "A nice man," Michael said, confused by my reaction. "He said he liked my trucks." "What did he look like?" Michael shrugged, the way 7-year-olds do when they don't understand why something matters. "I don't know. Just a man. He had a hat on." "What kind of hat?" "A baseball hat." "It was blue." "Did he ask you anything? Did he try to give you anything?" No, Mama. He just said he liked my trucks and asked if I was having fun. I said yes, and then you yelled. I pulled Michael into a tight hug, trying to calm my racing heart. That evening, I told Tom we needed to put up a privacy fence. Chain link isn't enough, I said. Anyone can see into our yard. Anyone can talk to the kids. Tom agreed immediately. That weekend, he and my father and Tom's brother built a 6-foot wooden privacy fence along the back and sides of our property. It cost money we didn't really have. We put it on a credit card. But neither of us cared. Our children's safety was worth any price. The 6th incident happened just days before the fair. I was at the post office, mailing a birthday package to Tom's sister in Nebraska. The kids were with me, and we were waiting in line. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the post office fairly empty, just a couple of other people ahead of us. Michael was holding my hand, looking around at the wanted posters on the wall with fascinated interest. Sarah was reading the notices on the bulletin board. I was mentally going through my to-do list, thinking about what to make for dinner. A woman got in line behind us. I didn't pay much attention at first, just gave her a polite smile the way you do with strangers in public spaces. She was middle-aged, plain-looking, with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that said Iowa State Fair on it. But then I noticed she was staring at Michael. Not just looking, staring. Her eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that made my skin crawl. When I met her gaze, she didn't look away. Instead, she smiled at me, a strange smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Beautiful children," she said, her voice flat and somehow wrong. "Thank you," I replied curtly, pulling Michael closer to me. The boy especially, those eyes, very distinctive. Every maternal alarm in my body went off. Why would a stranger comment specifically on my son's eyes? Why was she still staring at him even as she talked to me? "Come on, kids," I said abruptly, stepping out of line. "We can come back later." "But Mama, we're almost at the front," Sarah protested. "Later," I said firmly, practically dragging them out of the post office. Once we were outside, I looked back through the window and saw the woman still standing in line, but she'd turned to watch us leave. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was just watching with that same intense, unsettling focus. I never mailed that package. I drove straight home, locked all the doors, and called Tom at work. "Something's wrong," I told him. "I don't know what, but something is very wrong. These aren't random incidents anymore. Someone is watching our children, specifically Michael." Tom came home early from work. We sat the kids down and had another serious conversation about safety, about never talking to strangers, about screaming and running if anyone ever tried to take them anywhere, about how it was okay to be rude or mean if an adult made them uncomfortable. Michael, at 7, didn't fully grasp why we were so serious. To him, the world was still a safe place, and strangers were just friends he hadn't met yet. But Sarah understood enough to be frightened, and that night I heard her crying in her room, scared that someone might try to take her or her brother. We considered canceling our trip to the county fair. Tom and I stayed up late one night in early August, discussing whether we should go. But the fair was one of the biggest events in Cedar Falls, attended by thousands of people. Surely, we reasoned, in a crowd that big, surrounded by families and security and police presence, we'd be safe. We'd just have to be extra vigilant, keep the kids right with us every single second, and leave at the first sign of anything unusual. Looking back now, I can see each of these incidents so clearly, like photographs pinned to a wall with red string connecting them, forming a pattern I should have recognized. Someone had been watching my son, someone had been planning something. And despite all my maternal instincts screaming that something was wrong, despite all the warning signs, I didn't do the one thing that might have saved us from what came next. I didn't stay home. On the evening of August 12th, 1989, I made the decision that would haunt me for the next 35 years. I decided we would go to the Cedar County Fair after all. Because Michael had been looking forward to it so much. Because I didn't want fear to rule our lives. because I convinced myself that I was being paranoid, that nothing would actually happen, that I could keep my children safe through vigilance alone. I can still remember every detail of getting ready that evening. It was a Saturday, and the fair ran from Thursday through Sunday. But Saturday was always the biggest night, with the most people and the best entertainment. Tom had been home all day, taking a rare weekend off from work, and we'd spent the afternoon doing normal family things, mowing the lawn, washing the cars, making sandwiches for lunch. Around 4 o'clock, I told the kids to get ready. Sarah picked out her favorite outfit, pink shorts and a white t-shirt with a rainbow on it. Michael wanted to wear his cowboy boots and his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles shirt. I remember kneeling down to tie his boots, double knotting the laces, my hands moving through the familiar motion while Michael chattered excitedly about riding the Ferris wheel. Tom brought out the camera, a Kodak 35mm that we used for special occasions. We were running low on film, so we had to be selective about what pictures we took, but he wanted to document the kids' first big fair experience together. Before we left, I did something that now seems like a premonition. I brought both kids into the living room and took their picture in front of the fireplace, the August evening light coming through the windows behind them. Sarah had her arm around Michael's shoulders, and he was grinning that gap-toothed smile, his dark hair sticking up a little in the back, where it always refused to lie flat. "Why are you taking pictures now?" Tom asked, checking his wallet to make sure he had cash for tickets and carnival games. "I just want to," I said, not really knowing why myself. "They look so sweet." I took 3 pictures, just to be sure at least one would turn out good. Then I put the camera in my purse, grabbed the diaper bag, even though Michael was long past needing diapers. It was just habit to carry it with snacks and wipes and Band-Aids, and we piled into our station wagon, a 1985 Chevy Caprice in that particular shade of brown that was inexplicably popular in the 80s. The drive to the fairgrounds took about 15 minutes. The sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, the light turning that particular golden color it gets on summer evenings in Iowa. The cornfields we passed were tall and green, the crops looking good for a late August harvest. Tom had the radio on, playing country music, Randy Travis or George Strait, I can't remember which. The kids were singing along off-key in the back seat, Sarah making up words she didn't know, Michael just making noise that approximated music. I remember feeling happy, genuinely, uncomplicated happy. All my fears from the previous weeks seemed silly in that moment. We were just a normal family going to the county fair on a Saturday evening. Nothing bad was going to happen. We arrived at the fairgrounds a little after 5 o'clock. The parking lot was already nearly full, and we had to park in the overflow area, a grassy field about a quarter mile from the entrance. Tom grabbed Sarah's hand, and I took Michael's as we walked toward the gates, following the streams of other families all heading the same direction. The sound of carnival music and announcements over loudspeakers drifted toward us on the breeze, and I could smell funnel cakes and livestock and that particular scent of summer crowds, sunscreen and cotton candy and fresh-cut grass. At the entrance, Tom paid for our admission. It was something like $15 for the family, tickets that got us into the fairgrounds but not on any rides. Those required separate tickets that you bought from booths scattered throughout the fair. We got our hands stamped with invisible ink that would show up under black lights at the exit gates, and then we were inside, surrounded by noise and lights and people. Sarah wanted to see the livestock barns first, so we headed that direction, walking past rows of carnival games where barkers called out, promising giant stuffed animals and cheap prizes. The livestock barns were my favorite part of the fair. I'd grown up around farming culture, and there was something wholesome about seeing kids with their 4-H projects. Nervous teenagers showing off cattle and pigs they'd raised from birth, the smell of hay and animal feed, and the quiet pride of rural life. We spent probably 45 minutes wandering through the barns. Michael was fascinated by the pigs, pressing his face against the pens to get a closer look. Sarah loved the rabbits, asking if we could get one for a pet. Tom struck up a conversation with a farmer he knew from his work route, and I let the kids pet a particularly docile dairy cow while keeping a constant eye on the people around us. Nothing seemed amiss, just families and kids and farmers. Normal, safe. Around 6:30, we got corn dogs and French fries from one of the food vendors and found a picnic table near the bandstand where a local bluegrass group was setting up to play. The kids ate with the concentrated focus children bring to fair food, their faces getting smeared with ketchup and mustard. Tom bought them each a lemonade in a souvenir cup, and I cleaned them up with the wet wipes I'd brought in the diaper bag. "Can we go on rides now?" Michael asked, bouncing in his seat with barely contained energy. "Please, Mama, please." Tom looked at me and I nodded. The children's ride area was on the north side of the fairgrounds, a collection of smaller rides designed for kids under 10. A mini Ferris wheel, a carousel, little boats that went in circles, a small roller coaster called the Dragon Wagon. It was fully enclosed by temporary fencing, with only one entrance where parents could watch their kids or ride alongside them. We bought a sheet of ride tickets at the booth, 20 tickets for $10, each ride costing between 2 and 4 tickets. The area was packed with families, kids running around with cotton candy and glow sticks, parents standing in clusters while their children waited in lines for rides. Sarah wanted to ride the carousel first. She picked out a pink horse near the outside edge, and Michael chose a black one right next to hers. Tom got on the carousel with them. He was young enough and playful enough to not care if he looked silly riding a carnival carousel. I stood outside the fence with my camera, snapping a picture as they went around, Sarah waving and Michael gripping the pole with both hands, concentrating on his balance. After the carousel, they rode the Dragon Wagon 3 times in a row, and then the tilt-a-whirl, which made Sarah dizzy but delighted Michael. Tom took them on the bumper cars while I stood to the side, still keeping watch, still scanning the crowd, still seeing nothing that set off any alarms. It was almost 8 o'clock when Michael said he needed to use the bathroom. There was a restroom facility just outside the children's ride area, a concrete block building with men's and women's entrances on opposite sides. Tom started to take Michael, but Sarah was begging to ride the mini Ferris wheel one more time, and I could see Tom was exhausted from all the rides. "I'll take him," I said. "You take Sarah on the Ferris wheel." This is the decision that changed everything. This is the moment that, if I could go back and alter one single choice in my entire life, this would be it. Tom looked uncertain. "Are you sure? I can take him." "It's right there." I pointed at the bathroom building, maybe 50 yards away. "I can see it from here. We'll be back in 5 minutes." Tom nodded, handed me the diaper bag, and took Sarah toward the Ferris wheel line. I grabbed Michael's hand firmly, his small, sticky, perfect hand that fit so completely in mine, and we walked toward the bathroom building. The crowd was thick, people streaming in all directions, and I had to weave through groups of teenagers and families. I kept my grip on Michael's hand tight, not letting go for even a second. When we reached the bathroom building, I walked him right up to the men's entrance. "I'll be right here when you come out," I told him, kneeling down to his level. "You go in, use the bathroom, wash your hands, and come straight back out. Don't talk to anybody. Come right back to Mama." "Okay, Mama," he said, and he pushed through the door into the men's room. I stood directly outside that door, my back against the concrete block wall, watching the crowd pass by while I waited. The Ferris wheel was visible from where I stood, and I could see Sarah and Tom in one of the carriages about halfway up, Sarah's pink shirt bright against the darkening sky. The fair lights were starting to come on, the sun having finally set, and the whole fairgrounds took on that magical carnival glow. A minute passed, then 2. I checked my watch, an old Timex with a leather band that Tom had given me for our 5th anniversary. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I told myself Michael was fine. He was just taking his time. Maybe the bathroom was crowded. 3 minutes. I felt the first flutter of unease in my stomach. Should I go in? But it was the men's room. I couldn't just walk into the men's room. 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The flutter became active worry. This was taking too long. I grabbed a man who was walking past, someone who looked like a father with kids of his own. "Excuse me? Could you please check in the men's room? My son went in a few minutes ago and he should have been out by now." The man looked annoyed but nodded. He disappeared into the men's room. 15 seconds later, he came back out. "There's nobody in there, ma'am. It's empty." The world tilted. My vision actually narrowed, going dark at the edges. "What? No, my son, he just went in." I pushed past the man and ran into the men's room myself. Propriety be damned. It was a simple concrete room with 3 urinals, 2 stalls, and a sink. I checked both stalls, both completely empty. I ran back outside, looking wildly around. "Michael!" I screamed. "Michael!" People near me turned to stare. A woman grabbed my arm. "What's wrong?" "My son! He went into the bathroom. He's gone." I don't remember running back to the Ferris wheel. I don't remember how I got Tom's attention. My next clear memory is of Tom's face, white as paper, as I gasped out that Michael was missing. The next 3 hours are a blur of horror. Tom ran to the fair security office while I stayed at the bathroom area, screaming Michael's name until my voice was raw. Sarah stood beside me crying, not understanding what was happening, but terrified by my panic. Fair security made an announcement over the loudspeakers. Cedar Falls police arrived within 10 minutes. They shut down the exits, not letting anyone leave. They searched every building, every ride, every food stand, every maintenance area. They brought in search dogs. They interviewed everyone who'd been near the bathroom. They pulled Tom and me aside and asked terrible questions. Did Michael know not to go with strangers? Had there been any custody disputes? Any reason he might run away? "He's 7 years old!" I screamed at them. "He didn't run away. Someone took him." By midnight, the fair was completely shut down, floodlights brought in, search teams expanded to the surrounding area. News vans arrived. Reporters with cameras and microphones asked how we could have let our child out of our sight. At 2 a.m, the police sat us down and said the words no parent should ever hear. The first 48 hours are critical in cases like this. Tom and I didn't go home that night. We stayed at the fairgrounds until dawn, refusing to leave, as if our presence might somehow bring Michael back. My mother came and took Sarah home, and I watched my daughter drive away in my mother's car, her small face pressed against the back window, crying for her brother. By morning, Michael's picture was on the news. Local stations ran the story constantly. The FBI got involved because of the possibility he'd been taken across state lines. Volunteers showed up to help search. Hundreds of people from Cedar Falls and surrounding towns, organizing into search parties, walking through fields and woods, checking abandoned buildings. My father made missing child posters with the photo I'd taken that evening before we left. Michael smiling in his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles shirt, his cowboy boots, that gap-toothed grin. We posted them everywhere, every store, every telephone pole, every community bulletin board in 3 counties. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. We did everything the police suggested. Tom and I appeared on local news, making tearful pleas for Michael's return. We set up a tip line. We offered a reward, $5,000 that we didn't have, borrowed from Tom's parents. We consulted with psychics and private investigators and anyone who claimed they could help. But Michael never came home. The police investigated every lead, every potential sighting, every tip that came in. There were reported sightings in Nebraska, Minnesota, Missouri. We drove to each one, hope flaring and then dying when it turned out to be a different child, or a mistake, or just someone looking for the reward money. The man at the grocery store, the woman at the pool, the car at the parade. The police investigated all of it, but there was never enough evidence to identify anyone. The incidents had seemed suspicious in retrospect, but none of them had been criminal. No one had broken any laws. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses who could identify anyone, no security camera footage that showed anything useful. After 6 months, the active investigation scaled back. The FBI moved on to other cases. The police told us gently that, without new evidence, there was nothing more they could do. Michael's case was classified as a cold case, a horrible term that made my son sound like a file folder in a cabinet rather than a living, breathing boy who loved dinosaurs and hated green beans and always asked for one more story at bedtime. Tom and I tried to hold our family together. Sarah needed us, needed stability, needed parents who could function despite the enormous hole in our lives. I went through the motions, making meals, doing laundry, helping with homework. But I wasn't really present. Part of me was always back at that fairground, waiting outside that bathroom, frozen in the moment before my life shattered. Tom threw himself into work, traveling more than ever, I think because being home was too painful. Every room in our house had memories of Michael. His bedroom stayed exactly as he'd left it. Toys on the floor, bed unmade, a drawing of a dinosaur taped to the wall. I couldn't bring myself to change anything. The marriage didn't survive. How could it? We were both drowning in guilt and grief, and neither of us had anything left to give the other. We didn't fight. We just slowly drifted apart, two people living in the same house but inhabiting different worlds of pain. Tom moved out in 1995, and we divorced quietly in 1996. He remarried a few years later to a kind woman from Minnesota who'd never known Michael, who didn't carry the weight of that August evening. He died in 2016 from a heart attack at 60 years old, and I like to think that maybe he's with Michael now, wherever our boy is. Sarah grew up in the shadow of her missing brother. She was a teenager who couldn't have friends over because our house was a shrine to Michael. She went to college in Des Moines, partly to escape the suffocating grief of home. She's married now, has 2 children of her own, and she loves me. But there's a distance between us that I know comes from those years when I was physically present, but emotionally absent. Too consumed by the loss of one child to fully see the one who remained. I never stopped searching. Even as the years passed and the chances of finding Michael alive decreased, I kept looking. I aged from a 32-year-old woman into a 67-year-old grandmother, but inside, I was still that mother standing outside the bathroom, waiting for her son to emerge. I joined missing children's organizations. I learned about databases and DNA registries. I submitted Michael's information to every system that existed. When the internet became widespread, I created websites and social media pages dedicated to finding him. On every birthday, every Christmas, every August 12th, I posted his picture and his information, hoping that someone, coffee, and bring me along. It would seem natural, a family connection. And if the opportunity arose, we'd find a way to get DNA. The meeting was arranged for a Thursday afternoon at a coffee shop in West Des Moines. Sarah and I arrived early, taking a table near the back. I'd brought the photo I'd taken of Michael on the day he disappeared, the one where he was smiling in his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles shirt. It was tucked in my purse, along with a DNA collection kit Robert had provided. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd waited 35 years for this moment, and now that it was here, I was terrified. What if I was wrong? What if I'd let hope override logic once again? What if this destroyed me when it turned out to be just another dead end? Jennifer arrived first, a pleasant woman in her late 30s with Tom's family's characteristic red hair and freckles. She hugged Sarah and shook my hand, making polite conversation about the weather and her job as an elementary school teacher. "Marcus is running a few minutes late," she said apologetically. "He had to finish up something at work." Marcus worked as an electrician, we'd learned from Robert's research. He owned a small company with 2 employees, mostly doing residential work. He was considered reliable, honest, a bit quiet, but well-liked by his clients. 10 minutes later, the door to the coffee shop opened, and he walked in. Everything else in the room disappeared. The other customers, the barista, Sarah, Jennifer. They all faded to background noise as I looked at the man walking toward our table. He was taller than I'd expected, maybe 6 feet, with a build that spoke of physical work. His hair was dark brown going gray at the temples, cut short and neat. He wore jeans and a work shirt with Brennan Electric embroidered on the pocket, and his eyes, those deep brown eyes that looked so much like Tom's, so much like the eyes I'd looked into every night when I tucked a 7-year-old boy into bed. Those eyes met mine as he approached. I watched his face as Jennifer introduced us. "Marcus, this is Sarah, Tom's daughter, and her mother, Lorraine." He shook Sarah's hand first, a polite smile on his face. Then he turned to me, extended his hand, and said, "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Mitchell." His hand was warm and calloused, the hand of someone who worked with his hands. I held it for perhaps a moment too long, searching his face for any sign of recognition, any flicker that indicated he knew who I was. Nothing. His expression was polite, friendly, completely ordinary. We sat down, ordered coffee, and made small talk. Marcus described a complicated electrical job he'd finished that morning. Jennifer talked about her classroom and her students. Sarah shared stories about her kids. And I sat there, my mind racing, comparing every detail of this man to my memories of a 7-year-old boy. The way he tilted his head when he listened. Michael used to do that. The way he held his coffee cup with both hands. Michael had done that with his sippy cups. A small scar on his right eyebrow. Michael had fallen off his bike at age 5 and needed 3 stitches in that exact spot. About 20 minutes into the conversation, Marcus shrugged off his work shirt because the coffee shop was warm. He was wearing a t-shirt underneath, and as the collar shifted, I saw it. A heart-shaped birthmark on his left shoulder. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, and Sarah noticed immediately, putting her hand on my arm. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I managed to say, though I was anything but fine. I need some air." I excused myself and went outside, standing on the sidewalk, trying to remember how to breathe. Sarah followed me out. "It's him," I whispered. "Sarah, it's him. The birthmark. It's exactly the same." "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "I don't know. I can't just—" I couldn't finish the sentence. How do you tell a 42-year-old man that his entire life has been built on a lie? That he was stolen from his family 35 years ago? We went back inside. I needed to know more, needed to understand who this man was before I upended his world. So I started asking questions, casual questions that wouldn't seem strange coming from a new acquaintance. "Where did you grow up, Marcus?" "Sioux City mostly," he answered. "Foster care. I aged out of the system at 18. No family before that?" He shook his head, and something flickered across his face. Sadness, maybe, or loss. "Not that I remember. I have some early childhood memories, but they're vague. The doctors said it was dissociative amnesia from trauma." "What kind of memories?" I asked, my heart hammering so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. Marcus looked uncomfortable, like this wasn't a conversation he enjoyed having. "Just images, mostly. A woman with dark hair, a house with a porch, a backyard with a sandbox. But I was told it's probably just my mind making things up, trying to fill in the blanks." Those weren't made-up images. I had dark hair when Michael was young. Our house had a porch. Michael played in a sandbox in our backyard. "Have you ever tried to find your birth family?" Sarah asked gently. "When I was younger, yeah. But there's no record of me before I was found in Sioux City. No birth certificate, no missing child report that matched. It's like I didn't exist before I was 15. He said it matter-of-factly, but I could hear the pain underneath. This was a wound that had never healed for him either. Jennifer squeezed his hand supportively. "We've made our own family," she said. "That's what matters." We talked for another hour, and with every minute, I became more certain. This was Michael, my son, alive and well and sitting 3 feet away from me, with no idea who I was. When it was time to leave, I made a decision. Before we said goodbye in the parking lot, I turned to Marcus and said, "I know this is going to sound strange, but would you be willing to do me a favor?" He looked puzzled, but nodded. "Sure, I guess. What do you need?" I pulled out the DNA kit that Robert had given me, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. "Would you consent to a DNA test?" The temperature in the parking lot seemed to drop 20 degrees. Jennifer's face went from confusion to suspicion. Sarah looked terrified, and Marcus just stared at me, his expression unreadable. "Why?" he asked finally. This was it, the moment where I either told the truth or made up some excuse. I looked at this man, this stranger who was also my son, and I chose truth. "Because I think you might be my son," I said, my voice breaking. "I think you might be Michael Joseph Mitchell, who disappeared from the Cedar County Fair on August 12, 1989, when he was 7 years old." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face went pale, then red, then pale again. Jennifer grabbed his arm, saying something I couldn't hear over the roaring in my ears. Sarah was crying quietly beside me. "That's not possible," Marcus said, but his voice was shaky. Someone would have. That's not possible." "I have pictures," I said, pulling the photo from my purse with trembling hands. "This is Michael on the day he disappeared." I held out the photo, 7-year-old Michael in his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles shirt, grinning at the camera, cowboy boots on his feet, that heart-shaped birthmark visible on his shoulder where his collar had shifted. Marcus took the photo with hands that shook as badly as mine. He stared at it for a long time, and I watched his face as realization crashed over him like a wave. "I remember this shirt," he whispered. "I had a dream about this shirt. I thought my mind made it up." "Your name is Michael," I said through tears. "Michael Joseph Mitchell. You were born on March 15, 1987, at Cedar Falls Community Hospital. Your father was Thomas Mitchell, and I'm your mother, Lorraine. You have a sister, Sarah. We never stopped looking for you." He looked up at me, and in his eyes, I saw everything: confusion, fear, anger, hope, recognition, and a grief that matched my own. I can't. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Sarah said gently. "We're not asking you to. We just need to know. Please, take the test." Marcus looked at Jennifer, who was crying now too, overwhelmed by the enormity of what was happening. Then he looked back at me, studying my face as if seeing it for the first time and remembering it from a lifetime ago all at once. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll take the test." The DNA test was processed on a rush basis, thanks to strings pulled by our retired FBI agent friend. 72 hours. That's how long we had to wait for confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. Those 3 days were the longest of my life, longer even than the first 3 days after Michael disappeared, because this time I had hope, and hope can be more painful than despair. I stayed with Sarah, unable to face my empty house. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely function. I just kept staring at the photo from the reunion, at Marcus Brennan, who might be Michael Mitchell. Sarah tried to keep me grounded, reminding me that we needed to prepare for either outcome. "What if it's not him, Mom? What if it's just a coincidence?" "You need to be ready for that." But I couldn't prepare for that. I'd lived through losing him once. I couldn't survive it again. On Sunday morning, Robert Chen called. I was sitting in Sarah's living room, holding a cup of coffee I hadn't drunk, staring out the window without seeing anything. Sarah was next to me, her hand holding mine. "The results are in," Robert said without preamble. "It's a match, 99.9% certainty. Marcus Brennan is Michael Joseph Mitchell." I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel relief. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me, like gravity had reversed, like every physical law of the universe had just rewritten itself. Sarah was screaming, actually screaming with joy, pulling me into her arms, crying and laughing at the same time. But all I could think was, someone took my son. Someone stole him, kept him for 8 years, and then abandoned him with no memory of who he was or where he came from. Someone did this to us, and they were still out there, unpunished. The rage that followed the confirmation was unlike anything I'd ever felt. I'd spent 35 years in grief, but grief is soft compared to rage. Rage is hard and sharp and all-consuming. Someone had done this. Someone had taken my baby from a county fair bathroom and destroyed our lives, and they'd gotten away with it. But I couldn't focus on that yet. First, I had to focus on Michael. The meeting was arranged for the following Tuesday at Sarah's house, with a trauma counselor present. The FBI wanted to interview him, to try to piece together what had happened and who had taken him. But before that, before the investigation and the questions and the legal implications, he needed to know the truth. He needed to hear his story. I arrived early, nervous in a way I'd never been nervous before. This was my son, but he was also a stranger. He'd lived an entire life without me, 35 years of experiences and memories and growth that I'd missed. What if he hated me for not finding him? What if he didn't want a relationship with me? What if the trauma of learning the truth pushed him away? Sarah was trying to be supportive, but she was dealing with her own complicated emotions. She'd finally gotten her brother back, but he didn't know he was her brother. The sibling she'd mourned was now a 42-year-old man who was married and had his own life. Marcus, I still couldn't call him Michael, because that name belonged to a 7-year-old boy, and this was a grown man, arrived with Jennifer. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Jennifer looked protective and scared, like she was trying to shield him from a threat she couldn't see. The trauma counselor, Dr. Patricia Walsh, had worked with recovered missing children before, though usually with much younger victims. She'd counseled us on how to approach this, warning us that Marcus might experience a range of emotions from anger to denial to grief. "Before we begin," Dr. Walsh said once we were all settled in Sarah's living room, "I want to acknowledge how difficult this is for everyone. Marcus, you've just learned that your entire understanding of your identity was based on incomplete information. Lorraine, Sarah, you've just had your worst nightmare and greatest hope realized simultaneously. There's no roadmap for this. We're going to take it slow." Marcus sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped between his knees, his whole body tense. "I need to know what happened," he said. "I need to know everything." So I told him. I started at the beginning, his birth, his early childhood, what kind of boy he was. I told him about the incidents leading up to his disappearance, about the warning signs I'd noticed but hadn't acted on strongly enough. I told him about the fair, about sending him into that bathroom, about the 3 minutes and 45 seconds that changed everything. "I waited for you," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I stood right outside that door and waited, and you never came out. The police searched everywhere. We had hundreds of volunteers looking for you. We never stopped searching." Marcus listened without interrupting, his face expressionless, but I could see his hands shaking. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long time. "I don't remember any of that," he finally said. "I don't remember you. I don't remember the fair. I don't remember being taken." His voice cracked on the last word. "The amnesia is a trauma response," Dr. Walsh explained gently. "Your mind protected you by blocking out the traumatic events. It's possible some memories may return over time, or they may not. Either outcome is normal." "What do I remember?" Marcus asked, more to himself than anyone else. "I remember waking up in a basement, dark, cold, a woman who wasn't you," he gestured at me, "telling me my name was Marcus, that I belonged to her now. I remember being in different places, different houses. I remember the woman's face, but not her name. I remember being scared all the time." Jennifer was crying, holding his hand so tightly her knuckles were white. "I remember," he continued, his voice getting rougher, "being told that my real mother didn't want me, that she'd given me away, that I was worthless except for what I could do for her." He looked up at me, and the pain in his eyes was unbearable. "Was any of that true?" "No," I said fiercely. None of it was true. I wanted you. I loved you. I never gave you away. You were stolen from me, and I spent 35 years trying to find you." He nodded, accepting this, but I could see the conflict in his face. Intellectually, he could understand what I was saying. But emotionally, he'd lived for 35 years with a different narrative, and it would take time to reconcile the two. "The woman, the one who took you, do you remember anything that could help identify her?" This was the FBI agent who'd been sitting quietly in the corner. "A name, a location, anything?" Marcus shook his head. "When I was found in Sioux City, I was 15. I'd been living on the streets for weeks, maybe months. I remember running away from somewhere, but I don't remember where. The woman, there were actually several different women over the years, I think. Or maybe it was the same woman who kept changing her appearance. I don't know. It's all jumbled." "The foster care records from when you were found," the agent said. "They indicate you had signs of long-term abuse, malnutrition, old fractures that had healed badly, evidence of neglect." Marcus flinched. Jennifer moved closer to him, protective. "I don't want to talk about that," Marcus said firmly. "Not right now. Maybe not ever." Dr. Walsh intervened. "That's completely acceptable. You're in control of this process, Marcus. You share what you're comfortable sharing, when you're comfortable sharing it." We talked for another 2 hours, going through photo albums I'd brought, pictures of Michael as a baby, as a toddler, with his father, with Sarah. Marcus looked at each one carefully, searching for some spark of recognition, some memory to surface. But there was nothing. The boy in the photos was a stranger to him. At one point, Sarah came over and sat next to him on the couch. "I don't expect you to remember me," she said quietly, "but I remember you. I remember you following me everywhere, trying to do everything I did. I remember how you used to fall asleep during car rides with your mouth open. I remember that you loved dinosaurs and hated green beans and always asked Mom to read just one more story at bedtime." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, I don't remember." "Don't be sorry," Sarah said, taking his hand. "You survived. That's what matters. You survived, and now you're here, and we have a chance to know each other again. That's more than we had a week ago." Before they left, Marcus turned to me at the door. We'd been careful all afternoon not to push physical contact, letting him set the boundaries. But now he stepped forward and awkwardly hugged me, the first time I'd held my son in 35 years. He was so tall, so solid, so different from the little boy I remembered. But when I wrapped my arms around him, when I felt him breathe, when I smelled something in his scent that was familiar in a way I couldn't explain, I knew. This was my child. Changed, grown, marked by trauma I couldn't erase, but mine nonetheless. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered into my hair. "I don't know how to be your son." "You don't have to know," I whispered back. "We'll figure it out together." The investigation that followed was extensive but ultimately frustrating. The FBI reopened Michael's case, interviewing everyone who'd been involved in the original investigation, looking for any leads that might have been missed. They consulted with experts on child abduction, trafficking, and organized kidnapping rings. What they pieced together was horrifying. Based on Marcus's fragmentary memories and forensic evidence, they believed he'd been taken by a woman operating as part of a network that abducted children for various purposes. Sometimes for illegal adoption, sometimes for exploitation, sometimes simply because the people involved were deranged and wanted a child. The woman who'd specifically taken Michael had never been identified. Marcus's descriptions were too vague, and any physical evidence from 35 years ago was long gone. The bathroom at the fairgrounds had been demolished and rebuilt twice since 1989. The surveillance systems from back then had been primitive at best, and the footage had been recorded over long ago. They did identify some of the places Marcus had been held over the years, based on his descriptions and old county records. A house in rural Nebraska that had since burned down, an apartment in Council Bluffs that had been torn down to make way for a shopping center, a farmhouse in South Dakota that was now owned by a completely different family. Each location yielded nothing. No forensic evidence, no witnesses who remembered anything useful, no paper trail to follow. The people who'd held Marcus had been careful, moving frequently, using cash, leaving no digital footprint. The FBI agent explained it to me gently. "Mrs. Mitchell, the reality is that this case is 35 years old. The people responsible could be dead, could be in prison for other crimes, could be anywhere in the world. Without more concrete evidence or memories from Marcus, we may never find them." It was a bitter pill to swallow. I'd imagined that finding Michael would mean justice, that whoever had taken him would pay for what they'd done. But justice, I learned, isn't always possible. Sometimes survival is the only victory you get. Marcus struggled in the months that followed. Learning your entire identity is false doesn't just change your present, it rewrites your past. Every memory he had, every experience that had shaped him, now had to be recontextualized. He wasn't Marcus Brennan, who'd aged out of foster care and built a life from nothing. He was Michael Mitchell, who'd been stolen from a loving family and survived unimaginable trauma. He started having nightmares. Not new ones, but old ones that had plagued him for years suddenly made sense. Dreams of a woman with dark hair calling his name. Dreams of a backyard with a sandbox. Dreams of being lost in a crowd, searching for someone he couldn't remember. Dr. Walsh worked with him twice a week, helping him process the trauma, both old and new. She helped him understand that his amnesia wasn't a weakness, but a survival mechanism, that his mind had protected him in the only way it knew how. "You may never remember what happened in that bathroom," she told him during one session I attended at his request. "You may never remember the years you were held, and that's okay. You don't need those memories to heal. You just need to accept that they existed, that they shaped you, and that you survived them." Jennifer was remarkable through all of this. She could have run from the complexity, from the trauma, from the heavy weight of everything Marcus was dealing with. But she didn't. She stood beside him, went to therapy sessions with him, held him when he woke up from nightmares, and gave him the space to figure out who he was now. "He's still the man I married," she told me one afternoon when we met for coffee, just the two of us. "The trauma, the kidnapping, that's what happened to him, not who he is. I love who he is." Building a relationship with Marcus, I still couldn't quite make myself call him Michael. That name felt like it belonged to the past. Was awkward at first. We were strangers trying to be family, which is perhaps one of the most unnatural things you can attempt. We started with coffee dates, then dinners, then Sunday brunches that included Sarah and her family. Slowly, carefully, we learned about each other. I learned that he was naturally quiet, that he thought before he spoke, that he had his father's analytical mind and mechanical aptitude. He learned that I was stubborn, that I'd never given up hoping, that I had a wry sense of humor that occasionally surprised him into laughter. There were difficult moments. Once, about 6 months after the DNA results came back, Marcus asked me bluntly, "Why did you let me go into that bathroom alone?" The question hit me like a physical blow. It was the question I'd asked myself 10,000 times, the guilt I'd carried for 35 years. "I thought you'd be safe," I said, my voice shaking. The bathroom was 50 yards away. I could see the door. It was crowded, full of people. My voice broke. I thought nothing bad could happen in Cedar Falls, Iowa, at a county fair. 50 yards from where I was standing. I was wrong. I was catastrophically wrong, and I have lived with that guilt every single day since. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I don't blame you. I did at first, when I was angry about everything. But I don't. You were doing what every parent does, making a judgment call based on the information you had. The person to blame is whoever took me. The healing wasn't linear. There were good days and bad days, progress and setbacks. Some weeks Marcus wanted to see me 3 times. Other weeks he needed space to process everything. I learned to accept his boundaries, to let him set the pace, to be grateful for whatever relationship he was willing to build with me. Sarah and Marcus developed a sibling relationship that was strange and wonderful. They didn't have shared childhood memories to bond over, but they discovered they both loved old movies, that they both had the same dry sense of humor, that they both made the same face when they were thinking hard about something, a face they'd inherited from Tom. About a year after the DNA results, Marcus started calling me Mom. Not all the time, and sometimes he'd catch himself and switch back to Lorraine, but occasionally, in unguarded moments, the word would slip out. The first time it happened, we were at Sarah's house for a family dinner, and he said, "Mom, could you pass the salt?" The whole table went quiet. Marcus turned red, realizing what he'd said. I felt tears spring to my eyes, and I handed him the salt shaker with shaking hands. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're welcome, sweetheart," I managed to say. We didn't make a big deal out of it, but later, when I was helping Sarah clean up the kitchen, she hugged me and whispered, "He's coming back to us. Slowly, but he's coming back." One of the most profound changes was Marcus's decision to legally reclaim his birth name. After a year and a half of processing everything, he filed papers to change his name from Marcus Brennan to Michael Joseph Mitchell. It wasn't about rejecting who he'd been. Marcus Brennan was the identity that had kept him alive, the name he'd built a business and a marriage under. But Michael Mitchell was who he really was, and he wanted to acknowledge that. "I'm both people," he explained to me when he told me about the decision. "I'm Marcus, who survived and built a life from nothing. But I'm also Michael, who had a family that loved him and never gave up looking for him. I want to honor both parts of my story." The name change became official on what would have been Tom's 69th birthday. I like to think Tom knew somehow that wherever he was, he knew his son had come home. As for me, I had to learn how to live with a different kind of grief. The grief of the lost years, of the childhood I'd missed, of the young man I'd never known. Michael showed me pictures from his life: high school graduation, his first electrical job, his wedding to Jennifer. I looked at these photos of a stranger with my son's eyes, and I mourned every moment I hadn't been there for. But I also learned to live with gratitude. Gratitude that he was alive. Gratitude that he'd survived with his humanity intact. That the trauma hadn't broken his capacity to love, to work, to build a life. Gratitude that I got a second chance, even if it wasn't the reunion I'd imagined for 35 years. Michael never fully recovered his memories of the abduction or the years that followed. Occasionally, something would trigger a flash, a smell, a sound, a place that felt familiar. But the memories remained fragmentary, like pieces of a puzzle that would never be complete. Dr. A. Walsh said this was probably permanent, that his mind had compartmentalized those years so thoroughly that they might never be fully accessible. "Is that a bad thing?" Michael asked during one therapy session. "Not necessarily," Dr. Walsh replied. "Those memories contain trauma. Your mind protected you by blocking them out. If they come back, we'll work through them together. But if they don't, that doesn't mean you can't heal. You can move forward without them." And that's what we all tried to do, move forward. It's been 3 years now since I saw that photo on Sarah's refrigerator. 3 years since I discovered my son was alive. The story made national news when it broke. Missing child found after 35 years, miraculous reunion, questions about how the system failed him. We did a few interviews, hoping it might help other families with missing children, might prevent the same failures that had kept Michael's case from being solved sooner. But mostly, we've tried to live normal lives, whatever that means. Michael still owns his electrical business, still goes to work every day, still has the same quiet, thoughtful personality he had when I first met him as Marcus Brennan. But now he comes to family dinners on Sundays. Now he calls me on my birthday. Now he's teaching Sarah's kids how to wire a light fixture. Jennifer is pregnant with their first child, a girl. When Michael told me, he said, "We want to name her Dorothy after your mother, if that's okay with you." I cried for an hour. My mother passed away in 2003, never knowing that Michael was alive. But now her name would live on in her great-granddaughter, and that felt like a kind of redemption. I'm 67 years old now, officially a grandmother to Sarah's children, and soon to Michael's daughter as well. I still live in the house on Maple Street where I raised my children. Though Michael helped me renovate it last year, updating the electrical system and finally replacing those yellow kitchen countertops I'd lived with for 44 years. He also helped me transform his old bedroom, which I'd kept as a shrine for 35 years, into a proper guest room. We boxed up the toys and the drawings and the childhood artifacts together, and I cried while we worked, mourning the little boy I'd lost while grateful for the man I'd found. Do you think about what your life would have been like if I hadn't been taken? Michael asked me once. Every day, I admitted, but not in the way you might think. I don't fantasize about an alternate timeline where you grew up here, where I watched you play high school sports or helped you move into college or was at your wedding. Those are painful to think about because they highlight what I lost. But I also don't wish away the Michael you became, because the man you are, the survivor, the business owner, Jennifer's husband, the father you're about to be, that man exists because of the path you traveled, even though it was a terrible path. He thought about that. The therapist says, I need to integrate my identities. Marcus and Michael aren't separate people. They're both me. But it's hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm betraying Marcus Brennan by embracing being Michael Mitchell. Like I'm saying, those years didn't matter. They did matter, I said firmly. They made you who you are. The survival skills you learned, the resilience, the ability to build a life from nothing. Those are Marcus's gifts to Michael. You don't have to choose between them. You get to be both. The FBI never found the woman who took him. They probably never will. Sometimes I lie awake at night imagining her out there somewhere, maybe having taken other children, maybe having ruined other families. The anger still lives in me, hot and sharp, but I've learned not to let it consume me. Justice would have been good, but having Michael back is better. Sarah tells me I'm different now than I was in those 35 years of searching. You're lighter, she said once. Like you've been carrying this enormous weight, and now you can finally put it down. She's right. For 35 years, I was a woman defined by absence, by loss, by the child-shaped hole in my life. Every decision I made, every relationship I had, every moment of every day was colored by Michael's disappearance. I was a mother whose child had been taken, and that identity overshadowed everything else. Now I'm just a mother again, a mother with 2 adult children, one who grew up with me and one who didn't, both of whom I love fiercely. I'm a grandmother to 3 almost 4 grandchildren. I'm a woman who survived something unsurvivable and came out the other side changed but not broken. I attend a support group now for parents of recovered missing children. It's a small group. The statistical reality is that most missing children are never found, and those who are found alive are usually recovered quickly. Cases like Michael's, where a child is missing for decades and then found alive, are extraordinarily rare. But in this support group, I've found people who understand the complexity of reunion in a way others can't, the joy that's mixed with grief, the gratitude that coexists with rage, the relief that doesn't erase the trauma. We share our stories and our struggles and our small victories, and we remind each other that we're not alone. One woman in the group, whose daughter was found after 18 years, said something that resonated with me. People expect us to just be happy, and we are happy, incredibly happy. But they don't understand that getting your child back doesn't erase the years they were gone. You don't get a do-over. You get a different story than the one you expected, and learning to live with that story is its own kind of work. That's exactly right. I didn't get my 7-year-old boy back. I got a 42-year-old man who shares that boy's DNA but has lived an entirely different life. And learning to love this man, to build a relationship with him, to accept that the childhood I missed is gone forever. That's been the work of these past 3 years. But it's work I'm grateful to do. Last month, on the anniversary of the day, Michael disappeared. A day I'd spent in grief and guilt for 35 years. We did something different. Michael suggested we go to the county fair. My first instinct was to refuse. The fair was where I'd lost him. The fairgrounds held 35 years of trauma and horror and the worst moment of my life. But Michael insisted. "I want to replace the bad memory with a good one," he said. "I don't remember what happened there, but I know it's important to you. I want us to make a new memory." So we went, Michael, Jennifer, Sarah, her husband, the kids, and me, all 3 generations. We walked through the same fairgrounds where I'd lost my son, past livestock barns and carnival games, and the food vendors selling corn dogs and cotton candy. The bathroom building where Michael vanished is gone now, replaced by a modern facility with better lighting and security. We stood where it used to be, and I told Michael the story one more time, how I'd waited outside, how the 3 minutes and 45 seconds had felt like an eternity, how my world had shattered when he didn't come out. "I'm sorry I put you through that," he said quietly. "It wasn't your fault," I said firmly. "It was never your fault." We rode the Ferris wheel together, Michael and I, sitting in one of the carriages as it lifted us above the fairgrounds. From up there, I could see the whole spread of the fair, the lights, the crowds, the chaos and joy of a summer Saturday evening. "Are you okay?" Michael asked, noticing my tears. "I'm good," I said, and I meant it. "I'm really good." We got down from the Ferris wheel, and I bought cotton candy for the kids, and we played some of those ridiculous carnival games where you never win anything good. We stayed until the fair closed, until the lights started going out and the crowds thinned, and when we walked to our cars in the parking lot, I realized something had shifted. The fair wasn't a place of trauma anymore. It was just a place where one terrible thing had happened, but also where families went to have fun, where children rode rides and ate too much sugar and made memories. Taking back that space, filling it with new, good memories, felt like a victory. Before we said goodbye that night, Michael hugged me. A real hug, not the awkward, tentative ones from the early days, but the kind of hug you give someone you actually know and love. "Thank you for never giving up," he whispered. "Thank you for surviving," I whispered back. "I'm telling you this story now because I want other people to know that miracles can happen. Not the easy Hollywood-style miracles where everything is tied up neatly with a bow. Real miracles are messy and complicated and come with their own set of challenges, but they're still miracles. If you're listening to this and you have a missing loved one, I want you to know, don't give up. Keep searching. Keep hoping. Update your information in every database. Check every lead. Never stop believing that your person might come home. And if your person doesn't come home, or if they come home changed, or if the reunion isn't what you imagined, that's okay too. There's no right way to grieve, and there's no right way to heal. You do the best you can with what you have, and you keep moving forward. I also want to say something to other women my age, other grandmothers who might be listening. It's never too late to get a second chance. It's never too late for your life to change completely. At 67, I got my son back. At 67, I learned that the story I thought was finished actually had whole chapters yet to be written. Don't believe anyone who tells you that at a certain age, your life is set, your story is complete, your possibilities are limited. That's not true. Change can come at any age, in any form, when you least expect it. As for me, I'm still learning who I am in this new reality. I'm Michael's mother again, but I'm also Lorraine, a woman with her own life and interests and identity beyond motherhood. I'm taking a painting class at the community center. I'm thinking about getting a small dog. I'm planning a trip to Colorado next spring with Sarah and her family. I'm living instead of just surviving, and that's something I wasn't sure I'd ever do again. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Sharing this has been harder than I expected. Reliving all those years of pain, all those moments of hope and despair, all the complicated emotions of reunion. but it's also been healing in a way I didn't anticipate. And I want to ask you for one more thing. If this story moved you, if it meant something to you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Leave a comment telling me what you thought, or what country you're watching from, or just that you were here. These stories, real stories from real women, they need to be told, and channels like this make that possible. Your support, your engagement, it helps us reach more people who need to hear that they're not alone. And if you know someone who's going through something similar, someone who's lost a child or a loved one, someone who's given up hope, share this story with them. Let them know that miracles can happen, even after 35 years. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this community of people who care about real experiences and real hope. My name is Lorraine Mitchell. I lost my son when I was 32 years old, and I found him when I was 67. In between, I learned what it means to survive, to hope, to grieve, and to keep going even when it seems impossible. And if I can do it, you can too. Whatever you're facing, whatever loss you're carrying, whatever hope you're holding on to, don't let go. Your miracle might be just around the corner. Mine was hiding in a family photo on a refrigerator, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. It's never too late. It's never, ever too late. Take care of yourselves, hold your loved ones close, and never stop believing that good things can still happen. Thank you, and God bless.